Hello, BookTube. It's time for another essay. We're going to return to Charles A. Prance it's going to be an essay from The Laughing Professor, a further miscellany on books, booksellers, and book collecting, published in 1976 by the Villiers Publications, London. You might remember several essays we read from his Peppercorn Papers from 1964. Well, that's 1976. Did I say 74? That's 1976. This is 64 for the Golden Head Press. And I'll take the dust jacket off to read it. The book itself doesn't look like it's actually been read at all because it's very, very tight. So you can hear it creaking a little bit, opening up. Now, it's entitled On Rearranging One's Books. And Prance, there's three quotations at the beginning. I'll read those first. Each knows its place, and each may claim his part in some quaint corner of his master's heart. Oliver Wendell Holmes, The Study. Room for my books, room. Space is a tyrant. You can no more expand than you can time. Egomert. I was in my library making room upon the shelves for some books which had just arrived, removing to a less conspicuous station others which were of less value and in worse dress. When Sir Thomas entered, "You are employed," said he, "to your heart's content." And that's Robert Southey, Sir Thomas More, or colloquies on the progress and prospect of society. The essay starts, "Among the minor pleasures of life, I count that of rearranging one's books very high. But it is also too fleeting. Time simply slips away when once a start has been made. Too often the task is forced on one by lack of space. Recent acquisitions cry out to take their place on the already overcrowded shelves. The piles on the book table or desk become such that no more work can be done until the laden bookcase take just a few more. Tight packing, of course, is no answer, for it will ruin the bindings, particularly headbands and spines, and there is the annoyance of extracting a book from a too closely filled shelf. Each volume must have its fair share of air and space, like any human being. There ought to be a law against overcrowding on bookshelves, as there is against too little space in offices. The harassed book lover tries one thing after another, alternating the movable shelves, rearranging according to size, stacking on top of the bookshelves, and the final indignity, one row behind the other. This, the librarian's nightmare, is not too bad if the shelves are deep enough to take big books at the back and small ones in the front. But it still spoils the look of one's library, although some book collectors have been forced to this extremity in order to disguise or hide those finds which might otherwise be the subject of domestic criticism. But with all these trials, the pleasure of rearranging is still very great. With problems to be considered, how shall it be done? Shall we arrange them by author this time, or by subject, or both? It is good to have one's favorite books within easy reach, say, in a bookcase by a deep-seated chair, either by the window or in the summer, or a fire in winter, which usually means rearranging at least twice a year. Then size would have much influence on the system adopted. You may long to place the quarto large paper edition of your favorite poet's major epic next to the first volume of poems, but the publishers had no thought of your wishes, and the jewel beyond price appeared in a tiny duodecimal, which would look silly next to the quarto besides being a waste of space. Again, if you arrange by subject alphabetically, your love of Walton's Angler may be such that you hesitate to place it as a boon shelf companion to a book on airplanes. Of course, all true book lovers discard book jackets as soon as the volumes reach the shelf, if not before. Preserve these decorative appendages by all means, if you must, but don't let them disfigure your shelves and give a ragged, out at the elbows look to your precious books. The lifeblood of a master spirit is in between the covers and needs no poster or sandwich man to herald its treasures. Personally, I rearrange my books as the mood moves me. At one time, I had all my poets together by the favorite chair when they were replaced by the dramatists and books on the theater. At present, the place of honor is occupied by books about books. But by the pricking of my thumbs, I know that a change is imminent, and probably the stage is again to come into its own. Egged on by my caustic comments from my family, a crusade is sometimes started to dust the books. Let me warn you, don't have any helpers. This is essentially one of those do-it-yourself jobs. First, you will enjoy it. Second, the books will appreciate the gentle handling they will get, and you will rediscover many old friends whom you thought had deserted you, but had merely slipped behind another volume as though in shame at your neglect of them. Besides, there's no risk of your ever finishing the job. You just start, and the first interesting volume will find you ensconced on top of the library steps, the duster on the floor, and the world forgetting. But you will be supremely happy, and you will probably miss your tea, if nothing worse. Your family will no doubt tell you that if you had glass doors to the bookshelves, the volumes couldn't get dusty. They also add that if you had fewer books, they would be easier to keep clean. But experience will tell you that this second quirk is best ignored. Seize on the first and explain to them that books, like human beings, need light and air, that if you were incarcerated behind glass, they would suffer, and add that damp stains will reduce their cash value. They will appreciate this even if you don't yourself believe there will be much damage. Besides, you use your book so often that glass doors would be an intolerable nuisance. While you are rearranging the books themselves, don't forget that the bookcases can also be rearranged with advantage. If your book room is on the ground floor and no one is worrying about the weight on the floor beams, you could contrive most attractive nooks and corners by placing bookcases at right angles to the wall and the windows. On either side of the fireplace, they can be arranged back to back, and if they reach the floor, are first-class draft excluders, besides forming a hideout from those members of the family seeking help with crossword puzzles. Today, we are forced into many problems which troubled our ancestors not at all. Book jackets have been mentioned, but what are the paperbacks? You may case them in materials which can be brought for the purpose, but they are unlikely to do honor to your library. Have them by all means, for sometimes a book is available in no other form, and your pocket may not run to the cost of a hardback volume, even if it is to be had. You can, of course, have them well bound in cloth covers if they are sufficiently well produced to justify this expense. If not, there is only one answer. In their paperback undress, don't let them rub shoulders with your cherished volumes. Banish them to another room. Among the adjacent adjuncts of the book room must be mentioned bookends. To replace a family portrait on top of the bookcase by bookends and an armful of books tends to domestic friction, but by judicious rearrangement, room can be made for both necessities. When the first pair of bookends appear, they enclose half a dozen volumes, but soon they stretch out until nothing but fear of falling on the floor prevents them from going any further. Then comes the test of your own ingenuity. You try them at an angle, or with a row of small books in front, you steal from a vacant table a small space for another pair of bookends, but the books look untidy from the back. You put them on the windowsill, but in no time the sun will fade the bindings. Still, bookends are valuable and are sometimes used in public libraries to prop up books on the unfilled shelf. Alas, it is many years since I've had any such unfilled spaces where they could operate. Of course, rearranging does have one advantage. The very book for which you have the greatest need has changed its accustomed place, and for the life of you, you can't think where you've put it. You know you still have it. You haven't lent it, lost it, or sold it, but it just can't be found. Perhaps after all, your family were right, and it would have been better to distemper the kitchen wall or dig in the garden instead of rearranging your books, which only you use anyway. So yeah, so I mentioned the jackets. Now he talks about, you take them off before you put them on shelves. Well, this is what his looked like when it came in 1976. Still doesn't quite look nice, for a shelf, to me anyway. But this is an older one for the 20s. Now that looks nice. And, the jacket that would have been on this, chances are, would have been just a plain brown jacket. So it sort of makes sense taking it off. But I like getting old dust jackets on old books. Just for the fact that they're old and the jacket is still there. I'm just curious, what does anybody else think? Do people take off the jackets, even with new books, the way they look now? I think some jackets are perfectly fine. The only time I've ever taken off a jacket is that it's so badly damaged that there's nothing you can do with it, or it's so soiled. That's my preference. And what about rearranging? Does anybody else get the urge to rearrange their books and do so? As he says, to put favorite stuff within arm's reach and so forth, because I'm constantly rearranging mine. It's because of space, but because I've recently got a lot more books about books, I do want to put like I'm going to be moving stuff around here so I can access all of them better. And my sort of train, transportation, road books and so forth will be sort of semi storage removed. In a sense, they will be moved into the other room in front of other books, another bookcase, which I'm not using at the moment, but the books about books I'm using much more, so I want access to them. Does anybody else do things like that because of space? I'd love to hear in the comments what you do, and about cleaning. Yeah, do you get partially through and then stop? I've done that too. You partially start cleaning and dusting a book, and then you stop, and you forgot you had this one, and you spend the rest of the day reading it. Anyway, there ends the essay, and we'll continue on tomorrow with another essay. Take care, BookTube. Bye.